Hey, good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. Amazon and Microsoft employ a lot of workers with H-1B visas. Some of them faced chaos after President Donald Trump signed a proclamation last week that dramatically increased the application fee. New York Times reporter Karen Weise is here to give us some insight into what it could mean for companies who use the H-1B visa program and its workers. But first, let's get you caught up. Governor Bob Ferguson wants more Washington students to apply for federal financial aid. His office has launched a campaign that sets statewide completion goals for the FAFSA and provides help for schools for boosting the numbers. The governor's office says about half of Washington students qualify for student aid, but Washington ranks 47th out of 50 states when it comes to completing the required form. A geologist from Sammamish has made the cut to become one of NASA's newest astronaut candidates. Lauren Edgar was one of 10 candidates selected from a pool of 8,000 applicants to join NASA's 2025 class. It's no surprise, really. The 40-year-old Skyline High School graduate has worked for the U.S. Geological Survey and spent more than 17 years supporting Mars exploration rovers. Edgar will spend the next 2 years training for flight assessments as the team develops a surface science plan for the first crewed moon landing since 1972. And Washington's 10-year boom in the beer industry may be going flat. State figures show sales of Washington-made beer dropped 6.5% in 2024 compared to the year before. Beer production also dropped during the same time period. Beer economist Andrew Heritage tells the Puget Sound Business Journal the declines are a sign that Washington's beer industry has fully matured. According to the Business Journal, the state's beer industry employed nearly 28,000 people last year and paid out more than $1.4 billion in annual wages. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now.
Crazy turn of events. My boyfriend had to get up out of our Italian pasta making class in Rome and leave. I kid you not, leave. Not the class. Leave Rome because of the whole H-1B $100,000 situation.
Before this past Friday, the cost to submit an H-1B visa application was $215. The H-1B visa allows U.S. employers to hire highly skilled foreign professionals for specialty occupations, things like doctors and tech workers. But on Friday, President Donald Trump raised the cost to submit an application to $100,000. Some tech companies told their workers either stay in the U.S. or come back by Sunday, leaving many scrambling.
So they sent out these urgent messages, Amazon, Microsoft, other tech companies as well, saying, if you are abroad, get back on U.S. shores by midnight East Coast, or if you are already on U.S. shores, don't leave.
Karen Weise reports on tech for the New York Times. She says the administration clarified on Saturday that the new fee only applies to future H-1B visa applications, not current visa holders. The administration added that the program has been abused to create a disadvantageous labor market for American workers. The news has sent shockwaves through Seattle's tech scene. Karen's here now to tell us more. Hey, Karen, thanks. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Happy to join you.
Karen, did you or any of your colleagues at the New York Times hear from anyone who had to scramble back to the U.S.? What did you hear from them?
Yep. I spoke with someone who was stuck abroad and wasn't going to get back in time and was very nervous about that. You know, my colleagues heard from other people as well, similar types of things. And I saw people on various social media groups designed for people in tech talk about kind of an overwhelming anxiety and trying to figure out what to do. Can they get back in time? Even if they themselves weren't affected, they might have teammates who were, and trying to understand what it meant. And more broadly, what does it mean to be on that visa in the U.S. if you can't travel freely? So let's say you have an aging parent somewhere. How do you balance that with your job and your life, essentially? People talked about, should I be trying to move to another country or relocate to a different corporate office, things like that. So it created a lot of insecurity and called into question a lot of decisions. And, you know, tech workers are already in what feels like a pretty insecure position right now compared to a couple of years ago, because we've seen layoffs at the big tech companies. We are seeing this wave of AI wash through engineering and coding and things like that. So there's just a lot of anxiety around job security that just wasn't there during the kind of great reshuffling or whatever you called it during the pandemic not that long ago.
Sure, sure. All right, well, let's help listeners out here, Karen, and explain to them who we're actually talking about. Who is the typical H-1B visa holder?
So there's a huge range of people on H-1B visas. And I think that's part of why the program has sort of been in the crossfires for a long time. It's designed to be high-skilled workers where they're sponsored by their employer, and the employer says, I can't find people with these skills domestically, and so I need to turn to high-tech talent externally. The majority, work in computer science and coding and technology, but you also see it in other professions such as doctors. Like a lot of rural doctors will be here on an H-1B visa. And within the tech world, though, there's a huge range of skill and I think people would say kind of like ability that come in on these visas. And so on one hand, you do have some people making very high wages, very competitively kind of high-end tech workers. But there's also a lot of people that come in through these kind of third-party consultants that do lower level tech work. And they're making under $100,000 a year, not what you would think of as a typical tech salary. And there are these large consulting firms that have gotten really skilled at essentially flooding the lottery system used to give away these visas. There's a cap on the number each year. And so I think pretty much everyone thought the system wasn't working as intended, that you had this flood of these kind of contracting companies doing low-level work, and you had kind of difficulty in bringing in truly high-skilled work. And it just kind of created a mess. So the idea that this needed reform, I think, was pretty widely accepted, but was a shock was just straight up the chaos of this rollout and the lack of clarity over who was impacted. And then also the form this is taking, this $100,000 essentially application fee, because that's sort of a kind of a blunt instrument to use to try to focus on higher skilled work. So it's basically a way of saying, yeah, someone's that good and you really need them, pay up, essentially.
Yeah. And we can talk a little bit maybe about the chilling effect that might have moving forward. But first, why is the H-1B visa so important in the tech sector? Why do these companies need these programs?
We have had a lack of the skill internally in the U.S. We're just not creating historically enough people to do this work. And, there's been a lot of programs. Sometimes the tech companies, frankly, don't live up to their promises to hire out of the training programs that they support. So there is sometimes a gap there in the kind of work you need to do to bring people in and really train on the job then. Also, there are places abroad, in particular, India has a huge presence in this program that have very advanced tech schools, basically, where people train for years and years and have really strong technical education, so can kind of meet these roles. And for some of these, while they are supposed to be paid, not be underpaid or not undercut the U.S. workforce, has been research over time that shows that they have at times undercut, basically as a cheaper form of labor.
So what does this mean for U.S. employers? Are Seattle's tech companies prepared to sponsor a $100,000 visa?
One thing I will say is broadly, it's as people understand it now, it's a $100,000 application, but that's not annually. So, and you can extend this for many years. It's not like a once a year kind of thing. I mean, we've seen salaries for some people that are kind of absurdly high, frankly, for like AI engineers and things, and $100,000, frankly, is not much. But there are plenty of people where that's a substantial share of their compensation. So I think it will create a question of who is worth sponsoring going forward and who is kind of worth that squeeze. And the other thing that I think will have a big impact, while this is money I'm sure the big tech companies would rather not spend, they have more capacity to spend on that than startups. So one of the things I've heard a lot in the past few days is that while this isn't the system big tech companies would have designed on their own, it does give them an advantage over smaller tech companies who are already struggling to compete with wages at larger tech companies. For them to shoulder the $100,000 is much harder. Though I will say the global tech companies have had ways to get around or work around limitations with these visas in the past. They all want more H-1B visas than they can get by a long shot. So what you see is them opening global offices. So for example, all the tech companies in this region have pretty large presences in Vancouver, Canada. Canada has a much kind of clearer, faster, and more open high-tech immigration system. So we have seen very large presences built up just over the border where people are the same time zone and kind of the same, it's kind of culturally sort of similar, let alone kind of large offices in India or in other countries where people can work for the US tech companies. So there's other visa programs companies have used to sort of get around this as well. There's a managerial visa. There's a kind of a exceptional worker, even higher level of high skilled worker type of visa. So there are other ones, but this was still the kind of dominant one.
This was the big one. Okay. The proclamation, Karen, from the Trump administration also talked about putting American workers first. So explain how this might impact Seattle's employment landscape. Will there actually be more jobs here? How might this show up?
They kind of didn't by name mention Microsoft, but they functionally mentioned Microsoft. They said one tech company just did all of these layoffs, and here they are asking for all these visas. Another tech company in Portland, so it was essentially Intel without saying Intel, did a similar thing. First, I'll say some of those layoffs have been global. A lot of the last round of Microsoft's layoffs were abroad, actually. But we've seen plenty in our region. So yeah, I think there is a world in which you might see companies have to sort of rejigger their own workforce, because a lot of what they've been doing is laying off in some parts of the business and hiring in other parts. So there's a world in which you could imagine the pressure to lay off change versus, okay, maybe we do need to just do some form of retraining. What is challenging with this is they kicked in essentially immediately. So you have a difficulty of kind of a mismatch of how long it might take someone to train up, let alone if you're looking at the kind of sweeping people through the kind of coding and engineering and, long-term training that has to happen to develop a more robust workforce.
Is there actually hard evidence that the H-1B visa program is harming American workers?
This is a controversial topic. There is data that shows that it has, in some places, they do undercut wages and keep downward pressure on wages. The flip side of it is that these are some of the largest employers in the country and most successful companies in the country. And that's innovation that's happening here and not in other countries. And so if you look at the employment of an Amazon or a Microsoft, it's very substantial. And the flip side is that this has enabled American companies to be at the forefront of the technological revolution. And it's hard not to look at a city like Seattle and say that hasn't resulted in economic opportunity here. But there are a lot of people in the Seattle economy who are here on H-1B visas. And imagine, even though they may not be affected by this change anymore because they're already here, there's a lot of uncertainty that it brings. How do you buy a home? How do you decide to commit and put down roots here when you realize you might just be one kind of proclamation away from turning your whole life upside down? And so there'll be litigation, all those things, but it's just another reminder of the kind of precarity of not being on a more permanent legal standing.
Could people reconsider coming to the U.S. for these jobs?
Yes, I think so. I mean, the reality is for many people, this is a great opportunity still to live in the U.S., to make the wages you can make in the U.S., which is more than many other countries. But there are other places you can go more easily and more secure. And again, I not to pick on Canada right there, but there's a good amount of tech work in Canada. And you can get much quicker, much more stable paths there. So if the companies are more open to hiring even more there, which is not hard to imagine that happening, like it's not that far. You know what I mean? You come down once a month on, more of like the short-term business visa and you're done, So, I think it does become another factor. We've seen a comfort with kind of slowing down the flow to the U.S. I mean, that is what this administration was kind of brought into office to do, and they are delivering on that.
All right, that's the workers. This also presents a challenge for tech companies. Do you get a sense that this will impact their relationship with the Trump administration?
Well, they've all been silent, which I think is telling in its own right. I mean, in the past, they pretty much all say they support reforming the program, but all of the tech companies either did not respond to requests for comments or declined to comment. And this isn't like we're asking them to give feedback on like some unrelated thing, that's not core to their business. This is their own people. And there are ways in which at least the big tech companies could relatively benefit, even if it's not their core dream version of the reform by any means. But we didn't see anything. And I think that silence is pretty telling and a hallmark of this moment, because that would not have been the case even just a few years ago.
Are you saying it's too risky to say something?
Yes. I mean, I think that's the calculation that pretty much everyone has made. And I think I spoke to one person this weekend who said, just look at Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, it's commenting on a different type of thing, but there is risk to saying literally anything right now in a way that has not. And these are, again, some of the largest employers in the country talking about their own workers or not talking about their own workers. So it's just pretty striking. I understand initially trying to sort out what's going on, but we're past that point at this point.
Karen, what are you looking for in the long term as this big change goes into effect?
Well, there's some oddities about it that it's not a permanent plan. It clearly seems to be designed as some kind of stopgap measure. So I think I'll be curious to see what comes next. The other thing is there is an exemption for roles in the national interest. And so, for example, Bloomberg had a story about how doctors may potentially be exempt under this national interest provision because they are a substantial portion of the rural doctor corps, I guess. So it's not hard to imagine companies trying to argue for national interest exemptions for certain roles, trying to beat China in AI or whatnot. So I think there's still a lot to unfold about how it will all settle out and what comes next.
Yeah. Karen Weise writes about tech for the New York Times. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Karen.
Thank you.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now, and thank you for supporting us financially. Today's episode was produced by Vaughn Jones. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.